What's happening, guys? Just thought I'd show my face for a change, let you all know that it's not a robot making these videos. I'm just here to let you know about my Gorilla Monsoon video that I've just made. It's a complete history of his beginnings all the way to his death and everything in between that you can imagine that we all loved about Gorilla. But anyway, I'm not going to talk too much. I just want to give you a quick intro to let you know that I'm not a fucking robot. Let's enjoy the video.
Born Robert James Gino Morella on June 4, 1937, in Rochester, New York, he was a naturally imposing athlete from the start. At Jefferson High School, Morella excelled in football, track, and amateur wrestling, often dominating opponents in heavyweight wrestling tournaments. By his junior year, he had already claimed multiple city and sectional wrestling titles, demonstrating not only raw strength but a mastery of grappling fundamentals. At Ithaca College, Morella continued his wrestling career, competing at the collegiate level where his technical skills, stamina, and in-ring intelligence became evident. He placed second in the 1959 NCAA championships and set records for quick pins, highlighting his explosive power and tactical awareness on the mat. His amateur matches emphasized control, timing, and leverage. This size, strength, and technical skill made him a natural fit for pro ranks. Even before stepping into a pro ring, his ability to dominate, anticipate, and outmaneuver opponents foreshadowed the powerhouse style that would define his early career. Let's get right into it. Before Gorilla Monsoon became a household name, Gino Morella honed his craft on the amateur wrestling mats of Rochester, New York. At Jefferson High School, he dominated the heavyweight division, capturing multiple city and sectional championships. His matches were a study in control and technique. Morella leveraged his size, balance, and strength to execute pins in seconds, including an 18-second victory in a notable sectional final. These bouts showcased early signs of his stamina, grip strength, and grappling intelligence, skills that would define his professional career. Transitioning to Ithaca College, Morella faced stiffer competition in the collegiate circuit. Competing at the 1959 NCAA championships, he placed second, demonstrating a mix of power-based maneuvers and precise technical execution. Observers noted his ability to control matches, maintain positional dominance, and exploit openings with throws, body locks, and pins. His endurance allowed him to maintain high intensity throughout multiple rounds, a precursor to the long, grueling matches he would later perform in the pro ranks. Morella's in-ring approach combined brute force with strategy. He could dictate tempo, wear opponents down with sustained holds, and time explosive moves for maximum impact. Even at this early stage, his wrestling IQ was evident. He developed a reputation as a competitor who could outthink as well as overpower his opponents. These formative years created the blueprint for the Gorilla Monsoon persona, a wrestler capable of dominating physically while mastering the subtle art of ring psychology, pace, and crowd manipulation. After college, Morella transitioned to professional wrestling in 1958, debuting as Gino Morella. He worked primarily in regional territories, including Toronto, Calgary, and St. Louis, facing a mix of established stars and rising talents. In-ring, Morella combined his amateur wrestling foundation with power-based maneuvers, creating a style that balanced technical grappling with brute strength. He frequently employed body locks, arm drags, and headlocks, controlling opponents while demonstrating superior stamina. Matches often showcased his ability to dictate pace, switching between slow, methodical holds and sudden explosive slams to keep opponents and audiences on edge. Morella's early bouts highlighted his adaptability, whether facing fast, agile wrestlers or equally large power opponents. Notable matches in Calgary and St. Louis saw him execute quick pins, suplex variations, and signature power moves, all while maintaining a consistent focus on ring psychology. He would tease opponents with feints, sell attacks convincingly, and create suspense before finishing sequences, skills that would define his later persona. Even as a babyface, Morella drew attention with his athletic precision and endurance. He could maintain high-intensity grappling across long bouts, and his knowledge of leverage and mat positioning made him difficult to overcome. This period laid the groundwork for his eventual transformation into Gorilla Monsoon. Fans and promoters alike recognized his ability to carry matches and elevate other performers, making him a reliable in-ring presence across territories. Morella's early professional career established him not only as a physically dominant competitor, but also as a wrestler with keen strategic intelligence, setting the stage for his legendary run in the WWWF. If you're loving this deep dive into Gino Morella's early in-ring mastery, smash that like button. Don't miss the next part where he transforms into the legendary Gorilla Monsoon. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you catch every brutal slam, suplex, and psychological takedown from his epic early career. Seeking greater impact in the professional ranks, Marella reinvented himself as Gorilla Monsoon in the early 1960s. His new persona emphasized size, intimidation, and brute strength. He grew a beard, bulked up further, and adopted a monster heel gimmick. In the ring, Monsoon's matches evolved to match the persona. He relied on power-based grappling, devastating slams, and crushing body locks. Moves like the airplane spin and Mancunian splash became his staples, demonstrating explosive strength and technical precision. Monsoon also mastered ring psychology, controlling the tempo and forcing opponents into positions where his raw power dominated. He alternated between slow, punishing holds to wear down adversaries, then unleashed sudden high-impact maneuvers to secure victories. Notable early bouts under the Monsoon persona included matches in regional territories with the WWF, where he faced skilled opponents who tested his ability to combine strategy with brute force. He adapted each match to the opponent's style, sometimes incorporating feints or subtle counters to maintain control. Even as a heel, Monsoon displayed remarkable stamina, sustaining physical dominance across lengthy bouts while selling the drama of the match to the audience. Fans learned to anticipate the explosive finale, yet his unpredictability and timing kept the matches engaging. This transformation not only elevated Monsoon's in-ring presence, but also set the foundation for his rise in the WWF, where his combination of size, skill, and psychological mastery made him a top-tier attraction. In 1963, Gino Marella, now Gorilla Monsoon, joined the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, quickly establishing himself as a dominant force. His in-ring work became the centerpiece of his persona. Monsoon relied on powerful slams, crushing bear hugs, and the airplane spin to control matches. He dictated pace with methodical holds, then surprised opponents with sudden explosive maneuvers, showcasing his stamina and ability to maintain high intensity across long bouts. Monsoon's early feuds were against top stars like Bruno Sammartino, Bobo Brazil, Killer Kowalski, and Pedro Morales. Each feud demanded unique in-ring strategies. Against Sammartino, Monsoon combined ring psychology and brute force, targeting limbs to slow Sammartino's agility. With Brazil, he leveraged power and leverage, executing quick pins and holds to counter Brazil's athletic style. His bouts with Killer Kowalski were slower, deliberate, emphasizing strategic grappling and stamina. Monsoon would wear down Kowalski with body locks, teasing audience reactions, then finish with a signature slam or spin. Against Morales, he adapted to a faster pace, blending brawling with mat-based holds, showing his versatility and ring IQ. In addition to these, Monsoon had significant rivalries with Ernie Ladd, Ivan Putski, and superstar Billy Graham. Each feud showcased different aspects of Monsoon's in-ring prowess. Ernie Ladd, a battle of giants, emphasizing power moves and endurance. Ivan Putski, a clash of strength and resilience, with Monsoon often targeting Putski's midsection. Superstar Billy Graham, a high-profile feud that highlighted Monsoon's adaptability and storytelling in the ring. Crowds responded to Monsoon's control of matches, buying into the drama of each sequence. His ability to manipulate tempo, anticipate counters, and deliver explosive moves made every feud feel intense and unpredictable. As Gorilla Monsoon's in-ring career progressed, he continued to dominate regional and national events with his blend of power, stamina, and psychological control. During this period, Monsoon frequently engaged in tag team and singles matches, often pairing with or facing top-tier competitors like Haystacks Calhoun, Professor Toru Tanaka, and Baron Mikhail Cicluna. These bouts showcased his ability to adapt strategies, slowing matches for larger opponents or escalating tempo against agile competitors. In singles matches, Monsoon maintained a methodical pace, using body locks, headlocks, and controlled slams to wear opponents down. His signature airplane spin and Mancunian splash punctuated key sequences, providing dramatic payoffs after long grappling exchanges. Audiences responded to his ability to build suspense and manipulate match tempo, creating memorable sequences without relying solely on brute strength. Tag team bouts allowed Monsoon to showcase coordination and storytelling in the ring. He could dominate while allowing his partner or opponent to shine, balancing psychology, timing, and crowd interaction. Feuds with teams like the Mongols or matchups against Haystacks Calhoun and Tony Altomare highlighted his adaptability and endurance, often spanning multiple territories and events. Even as he approached the transition to commentary, Monsoon maintained high-intensity matches, demonstrating why promoters and fans respected his ring craft. His in-ring intelligence, knowing when to strike, when to wear down opponents, and how to elevate each match, laid the foundation for his later role as a commentator who could read the psychology of every bout. By the end of this early phase, Gorilla Monsoon had cemented a reputation as a physically dominant, strategically brilliant wrestler, blending power, skill, and showmanship. These years not only defined his in-ring legacy, but also set the stage for his iconic voice behind the mic. Gorilla Monsoon didn't just dominate rings. He crushed opponents, toyed with psychology, and left everyone guessing. From brutal body locks to the explosive Manchurian splash, he set a standard for intelligence and power in wrestling. On the next Gorilla Monsoon video, we'll dive into his legendary commentary career. From reading the psychology of every match to delivering some of the sharpest, most memorable calls in wrestling history, we'll explore how he transitioned from dominating the ring to dominating the mic. You won't want to miss it, and if you loved seeing Monsoon dismantle legends before the mic, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You won't miss a single slam, spin, or calculated takedown as we dive deeper into the careers of wrestling's most unforgettable giants. Monsoon proved that brains and brawn win every time. We don't do soft stories or nostalgia trips, we dig into the real deals, the backstage power plays, and the moves that made legends untouchable. Today, we're continuing to talk about Gorilla Monsoon, the man who outlasted the territories, outsmarted the old guard, and walked into Vince Jr.'s WWF with a lifetime seat at the table. If you've been here before, you know we don't fluff up history. If this is your first time, buckle up. We're going straight into the kind of backstage business heat most people only whisper about. So grab your seat, stop pretending you know the story, and let's see how Monsoon turned retirement into a power move that nobody else saw coming. By the time the smoke cleared on the old territory map, one man had already cashed out, clocked in, and guaranteed himself a seat at the WWF table for life. That man was Gorilla Monsoon. While the rest of the territory bosses clung to the past like it owed them royalties, Monsoon quietly played businessman. He'd already wrestled his last match, already counted his money, and already figured out the business wasn't about loyalty, it was about leverage. Vince Sr. was gone and the business was changing. His son, Vince Jr., was knocking on doors with cable TV in one hand and a buyout check in the other. Most of the old guard slammed the door. Monsoon opened it, smiled, and asked if the deal came with a commentary seat. He traded his ownership stake for security, power, and a parking spot that outlasted the boys who laughed at him for selling out. Turns out, he didn't sell out, he bought in early. By the mid-1970s, Gorilla Monsoon wasn't just a giant in the ring, he was a calculating veteran who knew when to walk away. His last matches weren't about glory, they were about positioning. Every slam, every chop, every splash of sweat on the canvas reminded the boys in the locker room that he still owned the room, even if he was thinking about what came after the bell. Monsoon's final bouts weren't headliners in the sense of drawing massive crowds anymore. He wrestled selectively, mostly protecting younger talent, while still maintaining the aura of invincibility that made him a household name. He was stiff enough to scare the rookies, but careful enough to leave them standing, most of the time. One remembered thinking, "This is a man who could crush me, but he won't. Not yet." Meanwhile, Monsoon had already begun scanning the horizon. The old WWF territories were crumbling. Vince Jr. was coming, and Monsoon knew the smart money wasn't on nostalgia. It was on being indispensable. That meant thinking beyond the ropes, beyond the arena, beyond the matches themselves. While the fans cheered and the younger wrestlers sweat, Gorilla Monsoon was already trading his in-ring muscle for boardroom leverage. He wrestled his last match, counted his options, and prepared to step out of the ring and into the most secure job in wrestling history. In the end, he didn't just retire, he exited on his terms, feared, respected, and already plotting a move that would outlive everyone who doubted him. After hanging up his boots, Gorilla Monsoon didn't fade into the background. He was one of the few wrestlers who actually owned a slice of the company. Under Vince Sr., insiders like Arnold Scotland, Toots Mondt, and a handful of backstage partners held minor stakes in Capital Wrestling Corporation. Most of them treated it like a hobby. Monsoon treated it like leverage. Scotland, the longtime mentor and manager, was loyal but cautious. He refused to sell when Vince Jr. started buying out the old guard. Mondt, the old booking mastermind, clung to nostalgia in the old territories. Meanwhile, Monsoon quietly sized up Vince Jr., realizing the young promoter wasn't playing games. Owning a piece of the company meant he could influence decisions without lifting a finger in the ring. He wasn't greedy, he was strategic. Monsoon watched as other veterans like Buddy Rogers and Pedro Morales resisted the corporate shift, trusting memories instead of contracts. The rookies were being pushed and tested in matches that looked brutal. But Monsoon knew the real test was backstage, staying relevant while the national expansion swept the territory bosses aside. By leveraging his ownership, Monsoon gained more than money. He got influence, respect, and visibility. While Scotland, Mont, and others debated whether to cash out or cling to nostalgia, Monsoon quietly ensured he'd be indispensable to Vince Jr.'s plans. He wasn't just surviving, he was quietly positioning himself to control his destiny in a company that would soon dominate wrestling nationally. By the early 1980s, Vince Jr. was consolidating power and going national, and most of the old guard weren't ready. Arnold Scotland, Toots Mondt, and even legends like Buddy Rogers hesitated. They either didn't trust Vince Jr. or clung to the fading territory system. Most of them would eventually be squeezed out or left behind. Monsoon didn't wait. He sold his minority stake in Capital Wrestling Corporation directly to Vince Jr., turning ownership into security. The deal wasn't just about money, it came with a guaranteed lifetime role in WWF. That included commentary, a say in backstage operations, and a front row seat in the creative and business decisions that would define the 1980s wrestling boom. Sources confirmed that Monsoon's move surprised many in the locker room. Scotland reportedly muttered he wouldn't sell, thinking Vince Jr.'s cable TV gamble was risky, while Monsoon quietly saw the future. He recognized that owning a small piece of paper didn't matter if you weren't indispensable. Being valuable to the new regime did. Even backstage, Monsoon's reputation helped. Heenan, Vince Jr., and other staffers all recalled how he carried authority without ego. While other veterans relied on past glory to keep their influence, Monsoon made sure he had the leverage Vince Jr. couldn't ignore. By cashing out at the right moment, Monsoon didn't just survive the national expansion, he became part of its foundation. The young stars like Hulk Hogan and Ricky Steamboat were being pushed into the spotlight, but Monsoon was the constant behind the curtain, ensuring the company ran smoothly while the old-timers wondered if they'd ever get a return on their stubbornness. Once the sale was complete, Gorilla Monsoon wasn't just a former wrestler with a paycheck. He became a fixture in the WWF's backstage and creative engine. Vince Jr. relied on him for more than commentary. Monsoon oversaw talent, advised on booking, and essentially acted as the bridge between management and the locker room. Names like Heenan, Sergeant Slaughter, and Hulk Hogan all recalled Monsoon as the man who could calm chaos or call out trouble before it hit the fans. Monsoon's lifetime role also gave him a unique perspective. He could observe, influence, and occasionally punish without being on the card. Young stars like Ricky Steamboat or Jake Roberts might be the ones getting the spotlight, but Monsoon's presence ensured the company's foundation was steady. In short, while others debated whether to adapt or retire quietly, Gorilla Monsoon leveraged his lifetime deal into real power. He didn't just cash out, he became the backbone of the WWF's transition from regional territory to national empire. By the mid-1980s, the WWF was a national powerhouse, and the old territory veterans were scrambling to find relevance. Buddy Rogers was gone, his influence faded. Toots Mondt had long retired, clinging to memories of the 1940s and 50s. Arnold Scotland remained in the company, but only in a limited managerial capacity. Monsoon, however, was still omnipresent. Gorilla Monsoon had outlasted everyone because he combined business acumen with in-ring credibility. Vince Jr. didn't just see him as a commentator. He was a trusted advisor, a stabilizing force, and the man who could smooth over conflicts before they blew up. Stars like Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, and Ricky Steamboat knew Monsoon wasn't just a voice on the mic. He was someone whose opinion mattered, and ignoring him could mean trouble. Even backstage chaos, heated arguments between Heenan, Roberts, and the up-and-comers, ran through Monsoon. He had the authority to check bad behavior, guide younger talent, and quietly keep the company on track. While most of the old guard faded into nostalgia or irrelevance, Monsoon maintained influence over both the talent and the corporate side, a combination few could achieve. His longevity wasn't luck, it was calculated. He retired from the ring, recognized the shift in power, sold his stake at the right moment, and leveraged his lifetime deal fully. Monsoon didn't just survive the WWF's transformation, he became one of its pillars, ensuring that when the dust settled, he was the one everyone could depend on to keep the ship steady. By the end of the decade, Monsoon's foresight had left a stark contrast. While most veterans had faded, he remained respected, feared, and indispensable. The only territory-era figure to turn retirement into lasting power. Gorilla Monsoon didn't just retire, he retired smart. While the old guard clung to the nostalgia and memories of the territories, He sold his stake, secured a lifetime role, and became indispensable to Vince Jr.'s WWF. He ran the locker room without lifting a finger in the ring, commanded respect from stars like Hogan and Steamboat, and shaped the company quietly but effectively. Monsoon outlasted legends, outsmarted peers, and proved you don't need a title belt to control the game. Well, that's all for today. If you enjoyed watching Gorilla Monsoon outsmart the old guard, hit that like button and subscribe. Don't miss the next installment, where we dive into his commentary reign alongside the legendary Jesse the Body Ventura. Trust me, it's full of backstage heat, sharp insights, and classic Monsoon wit. Gorilla Monsoon didn't leave the ring because he wanted to. He left because his knees quit on him, his back was screaming, and Vince McMahon Sr. didn't want him face first in the canvas every week. So instead of slamming people, he started talking about them. Commentary was his second act, and it was brutal, honest, and loud enough to make everyone pay attention. At first it was awkward. Vince yelling from behind the camera, Pat Patterson cracking wise, Gorilla trying to make sense of it all. It sounded like a wrestling show, if the show was actually a hostage negotiation. Then Jesse Ventura rolled in, and everything changed. Two egos, one mic, arguing like they owned the universe. Nothing scripted, nothing polite, nothing fake. The magic? They respected each other too much to lie. And the audience? They ate it up. Gorilla didn't need to wrestle to dominate anymore. He just needed a booth and a guy dumb enough to argue with him live. By the late 70s, Gorilla Monsoon's body was done. Knees shot, back screaming, and the ring looking like a personal torture chamber. He couldn't throw anyone, he couldn't take a bump, and Vince Sr. still wanted him around because, let's face it, he was good TV even lying down. So the booth became his new ring. At first, it was awkward. He sounded like a giant reading the phone book while someone threw punches behind him. Fans didn't care. They trusted him. He'd been there. He'd slammed people. He'd broken arms. He'd eaten chair shots that would put anyone else in a coffin. Gorilla figured out quickly that the mic wasn't about acting cool. It was about authority. Call a cheat a cheat. Call a move disgraceful. Remind everyone watching that the business had rules, even if the wrestlers didn't. Early partners included Vince McMahon Jr., Pat Patterson, and a few rotating names. Guys who brought energy, jokes, or chaos. Gorilla? He brought judgment. Every match had a moral compass, and he was it. By the time Jesse Ventura arrived in '82, Gorilla had mastered the booth. He knew how to control the conversation, how to elevate the talent beside him, and how to make the audience listen without screaming over them. He didn't just survive the transition from wrestling to commentary, he dominated it. And make no mistake, the booth wasn't safe. You either matched his authority or you looked like a fool. Ventura was about to test that in ways Gorilla hadn't faced since stepping into the ring. When Gorilla first shared a booth with Vince Jr., it was like watching two lions argue over who gets the last steak. Vince had that over-the-top, game show energy, all smiles, all sales pitch. Gorilla had that old-school, shut the hell up and call the match energy. They clashed instantly. Vince was trying to hype the brand. Gorilla was trying to protect the business. But here's the thing. Gorilla made Vince better. He forced him to sound legit. You could hear Gorilla roll his eyes every time Vince screamed, "What a maneuver," like a kid describing fireworks. Gorilla would just slide in with that calm, disappointed dad tone. "Will you stop?" 3 words, and Vince sounded like an intern on probation. They somehow made it work. The dynamic was gold. Vince was the hype. Gorilla was the credibility. One guy sold the circus, the other made you believe the tent wouldn't collapse. And off camera, respect. Real respect. Vince trusted Gorilla more than anyone. He gave him the headset, the booking input, and later, the corporate seat. Because Gorilla could balance chaos with sanity, and Vince needed that to keep from losing his damn mind. Their chemistry built the foundation for every commentary team after them. And when Ventura stepped in next, he didn't just fill a seat. He walked into their house, and Gorilla wasn't about to hand over the remote. If you're still here, congrats. You officially lasted longer than any of Vince's commentary partners. Hit like before Gorilla yells, "Will you stop?" at me. Subscribe now, because next, we're diving into when Jesse Ventura showed up, turned up the volume, and made every broadcast feel like a bar fight. When Jesse Ventura joined Gorilla in the booth, it wasn't commentary anymore. It was combat with microphones. Ventura strutted in like a rock star who'd just discovered adjectives. The guy dressed like he was auditioning for Mad Max 4, called everyone brain dead, and thought every heel was a misunderstood genius. And Gorilla? He treated Jesse like an unvaccinated conspiracy theory. The chemistry was chaos, and that's why it worked. Ventura would brag about the villains, flex his ego, and poke the bear every damn sentence. Then Gorilla would fire back with that calm, cutting tone that said, "You're the dumbest genius I've ever met." They roasted each other for sport. No notes, no scripts, just live venom. Jesse: "Gorilla, you wouldn't know talent if it slapped you." Gorilla: "That explains why I can't see you." Crowd in the truck, losing it. It was the perfect clash. Ventura the showman, Gorilla the anchor, and they respected each other enough to never pull a punch. Backstage, it was mutual. They were friends. But the minute those headsets went on, it was war. Real tension, real timing, zero fake laughs. Fans didn't just listen. They picked sides. Were you Team Gorilla, the voice of reason? Or Team Jesse, the egomaniac heel supporter with better hair than half the locker room? Together, they defined the WWF sound of the 80s, and when Jesse left, the booth felt quieter, because nobody could push Gorilla that far and survive the conversation. Before Gorilla and Jesse ran the booth, there was the weird era, the commentary buffet nobody asked for. Pat Patterson was first. Pat had a chemistry with Gorilla. If by chemistry you mean two guys politely talking over each other, Pat would giggle, slip into French, and forget to call the finish. Gorilla would just stare at him like, "This is why we needed closed captions." Then of course we have Lord Alfred Hayes, the politest man to ever get bullied by sound waves. He'd whisper about extraordinary athleticism, and Gorilla would bulldoze over it with a deep, "New York, oh would you stop?" Hayes would smile like a hostage trying to negotiate with charm. It was the strangest duo in the WWF history. Nobody knew who was supposed to be the straight man, because none of them were standing up straight after Gorilla's verbal body slams. Every broadcast felt like a job interview that kept going wrong. Still, Gorilla gave them space. He knew they weren't Jesse. Hell, he knew nobody was Jesse. But these early partnerships helped him find that trademark tone. That sarcastic, "I'm too old for this" energy that made him sound like every dad watching Hulk Hogan flex at Thanksgiving. These were the test runs, the warm-ups, the awkward first dates before the perfect match. Because once Bobby Heenan arrived, the game changed again, and Gorilla finally had someone who could throw heat and take it. When Bobby the Brain Heenan joined Gorilla Monsoon on commentary, wrestling TV didn't get funnier, it got meaner. Heenan walked in like the class clown who just realized the teacher can't fire him. He didn't care about rules, stories, or staying on topic. He was there to make himself laugh, and to make Gorilla lose his mind. Their chemistry was instant chaos. Bobby would insult everyone, trip over his own logic, and still somehow win the argument. Gorilla didn't try to compete, he just demolished him with tone. That slow, disappointed dad voice. "Will you stop?" It hit harder than any punch Heenan ever took in the ring. The insults were surgical. Heenan called faces ham and eggers. Gorilla fired back like a prosecutor with perfect timing. It wasn't fake heat. It was a friendship so strong they could annihilate each other on live TV and still laugh backstage. And behind the laughter was respect. Gorilla protected Heenan when he was hurting. Heenan said, "Gorilla was the best partner I ever had." You could tell, the way they paused for each other, let jokes breathe, then twisted the knife right after. They didn't call matches. They ran the show. Fans tuned in less for the wrestling, more for the roast. Every brain comment set up a Gorilla punchline, and every Gorilla sigh made Heenan double down harder. One guy roasting, one guy reacting, both unstoppable. When Bobby left, Gorilla lost more than a partner. He lost the guy who could make him laugh while keeping kayfabe alive. Gorilla Monsoon didn't just survive wrestling, he evolved it. He went from throwing guys around in smoky arenas to controlling the entire tone of the WWF with one voice. From Vince to Ventura to Heenan. He made legends sound better just by sitting next to them. He wasn't just commentary, he was credibility. And if you thought his chemistry with Jesse was wild, wait until we dive into the full war with Bobby the Brain Heenan. Because that wasn't commentary. That was live comedy with headsets and insults. And Gorilla never missed a cue. Name a better duo. You can't. And if you tried, you'd just embarrass yourself. Before commentary became a shout fest of corporate buzzwords, there was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, two guys who could turn a throwaway match into must-see TV. They weren't reading Vince's lines, they were the show. Gorilla, the ex-wrestler turned booth general, was the steady hand. Heenan, the loudmouth genius, was the chaos. Together, they didn't just call wrestling, they defined how fans heard it. And what made it work wasn't just timing or comedy, it was chemistry. Real-life friendship, brutal honesty, and a kind of respect that's extinct in today's business. When Gorilla said, "Will you stop?" you believed he meant it. When Heenan snapped back, it wasn't an act. It was two men who trusted each other enough to go off script and still steal the show. These two were untouchable, and wrestling's never had another pair like them since. Before they ever sat at the commentary desk, Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan already respected each other. They weren't buddies right away. Heenan was still in his "I manage stars, not curtain jerkers" era, and Gorilla was the quiet locker room general who didn't have time for anyone's ego. But when Vince paired them up, lightning hit. The moment Heenan opened his mouth, Gorilla saw something most didn't. Timing. Not wrestling timing, comedy timing. He knew this guy could make silence funny. Off camera, Gorilla treated Bobby like a younger brother. He'd rib him, insult him, and then take him out for dinner right after. They'd argue about lines, call each other idiots, then go live and make magic. And that's the thing. None of it was scripted. Heenan once said, "They just told us to talk. We didn't rehearse, we didn't plan. That's why it worked." You had Gorilla, the straight man who sounded like your dad telling you to stop being stupid. And Heenan, the sarcastic genius who'd double down just to piss him off. Their chemistry was so tight, even Vince didn't touch it. That's how rare they were. They made bad matches entertaining. They made good matches iconic. And they made the booth the most dangerous comedy club in the business. When Gorilla said, "Give me a break," you didn't hear commentary. You heard friendship, wit, and two guys who didn't give a damn about being polished. They were raw, real, and impossible to replicate. When Vince McMahon threw Gorilla and Heenan together for primetime wrestling, he probably thought it'd be just another studio wrap-up show. He had no idea he just created the best double act in the history of wrestling television. Forget scripts, forget fake banter. These two treated primetime like a weekly roast battle, and Gorilla always had the last word. Heenan would come in swinging, running down the baby faces, calling everyone a ham and egger, and Gorilla would drop him flat with one line. "Would you stop?" That became gospel. Behind the camera, everyone watched them crack each other up between takes. The producers would have to cut so many segments because Gorilla and Bobby couldn't hold it together. Their chemistry wasn't written, it was instinct. When you watch primetime, you're not seeing a show. You're seeing two guys competing to make the other break first. And every time, Gorilla's smirk told you he won again. What made it special was the trust. Gorilla could insult Heenan brutally, call him the brainless one, or tell him to leave the planet. And Bobby would sell it like a pro because he knew Gorilla loved him. And yeah, Heenan admitted later, "No one protected me like Gorilla did. He made me look good every night." They didn't just host a show. They made fans fall in love with wrestling through them. When primetime ended, so did that era. Because once you've seen perfection, everything after just looks like background noise. Primetime wrestling wasn't Vince McMahon's first attempt at a studio show. It wasn't even the best at the start. It officially launched in 1985, designed to replace the slow regional recap shows with something national, flashy, and, most importantly, cheap to produce. The idea? Take old footage, sprinkle in some live commentary, and package it for cable TV. Sounds boring, right? Except Vince had Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, and suddenly it wasn't boring at all. Gorilla had been doing commentary for years by then. His voice carried authority, his instincts were sharp. Heenan, meanwhile, had just transitioned from managing into TV commentary. He brought snark, bite, and a kind of theatrical venom that made every insult land. The first episode? It was rough. They were figuring out camera angles, running lines off the cuff, and learning how to improvise with old footage. But even then, the seeds of magic were planted. Some sources credit McMahon and Vince Russo's predecessors for greenlighting the show's initial concept. But the truth is this. The show lived because of the duo. Without Gorilla and Heenan, primetime would have been a forgettable afterthought. With them, it became a weekly event fans tuned in just to hear what they'd say next. Fans didn't just watch the matches. They watched the chemistry, the jokes, the way Gorilla could roast Heenan without killing him, and the way Heenan pushed Gorilla into comedy brilliance without him even realizing it. Let's get one thing straight. Gorilla and Heenan didn't just talk over matches. They turned chaos into comedy, mistakes into magic, and insults into gold. First up, the suntanned mannequin moment. Heenan was ripping on Hulk Hogan's promo, calling him a suntanned mannequin. Gorilla? Deadpan smirk. Fans heard the chemistry, knew this wasn't scripted, and went nuts. Hogan? He never lived it down backstage. Then there was the botched tag match. The Hart Foundation faces off against the Killer Bees. The Bees got their mask mix-up spot tangled, the ref lost track. Gorilla calmly called it, while Heenan tore into him for defending bumbling fools. Not to mention the 1987 Battle Royale segment. Multiple eliminations botched. Heenan blamed the refs. Gorilla smirked and said, "Will you stop?" A classic. Every time you hear it. Then there's the interference meltdown early 1986. Randy Savage was in the ring when George Steele ran in, obsessed with Miss Elizabeth. Heenan screamed at the ref. Gorilla calmly explained the rules. The straight man versus chaos dynamic was perfect. Finally, the classic Gorilla roast. Across multiple primetime segments, Heenan called Gorilla's laugh capable of starting a war. Gorilla fired back, and your face could end one. No script, pure chemistry, and a reminder why commentary mattered as much as the matches themselves. These 4 moments are just a fraction of their brilliance. Hundreds more clips, gags, and deadpan takedowns exist, but these show their genius. Timing, trust, and a level of improv no one has matched since. Gorilla and Heenan weren't just untouchable, they defined what live wrestling commentary could be. Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan created one of the most legendary commentary duos starting in 1986. Heenan stayed with WWF until 1993, after which Gorilla was left to hold the booth alone. The dynamic changed instantly. No more chaos versus straight man banter, no more perfectly timed burns. Gorilla became the anchor, the voice Vince trusted to keep the show grounded. Fans noticed, and the spark that made primetime legendary had dimmed, but Gorilla remained professional and authoritative. On July 4th, 1994, Joey Morella, the 31-year-old adopted son of Gorilla Monsoon, tragically passed away in a car accident on the New Jersey Turnpike near Willingboro, New Jersey. After officiating an event in Ocean City, Maryland, Morella offered to drive fellow employee Bruno Lauer home. During the drive, Morella fell asleep at the wheel, causing the vehicle to crash into a tree. Lauer survived the crash due to wearing a seatbelt, but Morella, who was not wearing one, died at the scene from blunt force trauma. The loss deeply affected Gorilla Monsoon, who was known for his stoic demeanor. Despite his grief, Monsoon continued his work in the wrestling industry, finding solace in the community and the profession he loved. His resilience in the face of such personal tragedy highlighted his dedication to the sport and his enduring strength. He continued to call major matches, including WrestleMania events and big pay-per-views throughout the late 80s and early 90s. Backstage, he was feared and respected. Brutally honest, zero ego. Mess up on his watch and he'd tell you straight. He made everyone better simply by being present. Health issues began in the mid-90s. By 1996, Gorilla reduced his schedule, appearing mostly for major events but never fully retired. He wanted to stay in the business until he physically couldn't. On October 6, 1999, he passed away from heart failure at age 62. Tributes poured in from fans, wrestlers, and colleagues who remembered his wit, authority, and unmatched presence. Vince McMahon called him irreplaceable. Legends like Ric Flair, Roddy Piper, and Jesse Ventura praised his influence on commentary and wrestling history. Gorilla's legacy wasn't just his voice, it was the standard he set: timing, honesty, trust with your partner. He made commentary matter, he made it entertaining, and he left a blueprint that no one has truly matched. Even today, clips from primetime wrestling and classic WWF broadcasts show why Gorilla Monsoon was untouchable. The man didn't just call matches, he defined an era and proved that respect, skill, and presence cannot be faked. Gorilla Monsoon wasn't just a voice, he was authority, timing, and integrity in a world full of chaos. From primetime to WrestleMania, from Heenan's jabs to live disasters, he made commentary matter. His legacy is in every perfect call, every deadpan reaction, every match elevated by his presence. Gorilla Monsoon didn't just narrate wrestling, he defined it. Untouchable, unforgettable, and impossible to replace. If you loved reliving Gorilla's legendary moments, smash that like button. Subscribe for more savage shoot-style wrestling history, real backstage heat, and untold stories that the WWE won't show you. Hit notifications, because missing this content would be a crime. He was the voice of a generation and the brawn of an earlier one. With a booming presence and a heart just as large, Gorilla Monsoon was one of the most beloved figures in professional wrestling history. For fans who grew up in the 1980s and early 1990s, Gorilla wasn't just an announcer, he was the announcer. He was the steady voice in the chaos, the moral compass in a world of backstabbing heels and heroic babyfaces. But before he was the voice behind the mic, Gorilla Monsoon was a rough and tough grappler, a towering force who ruled the ring in the 60s and 70s. Born Robert Morella in 1937, the man who would become Gorilla Monsoon started out in amateur wrestling and shot to prominence in the professional circuit thanks to his enormous size, nearly 400 pounds, and surprisingly agile skill set. Nicknamed the Manchurian Giant early in his career, he eventually embraced the persona of Gorilla Monsoon, a snarling, monstrous heel who dominated opponents with brute force and savage intensity. He'd eventually transitioned to beloved color commentator and backstage authority, partnering with the likes of Bobby the Brain Heenan and Jesse the Body Ventura. But don't let the warm chuckles and lighthearted banter fool you. Gorilla Monsoon had seen it all behind the curtain. As an executive in the World Wrestling Federation and right-hand man to Vince McMahon Sr. and later Jr., Monsoon had pull and opinions. He was widely respected, if not feared, in the locker room, not because he was cruel or cutthroat, but because Monsoon didn't play games. He had a no-nonsense approach to business, a soft spot for old-school values, and a distinct intolerance for ego-driven drama. While Monsoon could be patient and mentoring to many, there were a few wrestlers he just couldn't stand working with. Whether it was their attitude, their style, or their complete disregard for locker room etiquette, these men got on Gorilla's bad side, and it showed. Let's pull back the curtain and explore the fascinating, lesser-known side of Gorilla Monsoon, the part of him that could make or break your career, especially if you rubbed him the wrong way. Gorilla Monsoon had the patience of a saint when it came to rookies, but even he had limits, and the Ultimate Warrior tested every one of them. There was no doubt Warrior had the it factor, a chiseled physique, unbridled energy, and a look that screamed main event superstar. Vince McMahon loved him, fans adored him. But backstage, he was a walking tornado of ego, bad timing, and chaos. Monsoon, who by the late 1980s was doing more backstage work and commentary than wrestling, found Warrior's unpredictable nature infuriating. Warrior was notorious for blowing off agent instructions, forgetting spots, and endangering other wrestlers with his reckless in-ring behavior. Worse still, he had no grasp of the unspoken locker room hierarchy, and that didn't sit well with Gorilla. According to former WWE producer Bruce Pritchard, Monsoon once said Warrior wasn't just green, he was neon. Gorilla had little time for wrestlers who didn't respect the craft, and Warrior's meteoric rise, fueled more by charisma than skill, seemed to embody everything Monsoon disliked about the changing industry. Their backstage confrontations weren't exactly explosive, but there was a visible frost in Gorilla's demeanor whenever Warrior was mentioned on commentary. Monsoon would praise his strength, but often mask subtle digs within his classic phrases like, "This guy doesn't have a clue where he is," or "What a miscarriage of justice." Nails was involved in one of the most notorious behind-the-scenes incidents in wrestling history, a real-life assault on Vince McMahon in 1992 over a pay dispute. Gorilla Monsoon, who was not only close to Vince Sr. but fiercely loyal to the company, took the incident personally. Monsoon was reportedly in the building when Nails attacked Vince and had to be physically restrained by other personnel from going after the former prison guard gimmick himself. Monsoon didn't care if Nails felt wronged. He saw the attack as disgraceful and unprofessional. In later interviews, Monsoon would never explicitly mention Nails, but those close to him, including wrestlers like Jim Ross and Pat Patterson, confirmed Monsoon considered him scum and blacklisted him from any future bookings. Gorilla didn't just dislike Nails, he detested him. Once you crossed that kind of line, there was no redemption in Monsoon's eyes. At one point, Monsoon had great respect for Hossein Khosrow Ali Vaziri, better known as the Iron Sheik. A legitimate Olympic-level grappler and gifted heel, Sheik had carved out a special place for himself in the industry. But as the years went on, his erratic behavior, substance issues, and explosive temper wore thin on Gorilla's patience. Monsoon was part of the brass that had to deal with Sheik's erratic no-shows and drunken outbursts in the mid-1980s. There were times Sheik would arrive at events barely coherent, or get into heated arguments with other wrestlers backstage. What really irked Gorilla was the sense that Sheik was throwing away his potential. Monsoon believed in respecting the business and taking care of your opponents. Watching Sheik decline from a world-class heel to a walking liability was, to him, a betrayal of everything they had once stood for. Though never publicly hostile, Monsoon would often refer to Sheik as unpredictable in all the wrong ways during commentary and backstage meetings. Their professional relationship eventually dissolved into a begrudging tolerance at best. This one might come as a surprise. Special Delivery Jones and Gorilla Monsoon were actually friends outside the ring, and their careers overlapped in the 1970s and 80s, but sometimes even a friend can drive you up the wall. SD Jones was a beloved babyface and enhancement talent, known for his bright smile and colorful personality, but Monsoon reportedly grew frustrated with SD's laid-back approach to in-ring psychology and preparation. He wasn't lazy, just inconsistent. Jones had a tendency to ad-lib or veer from planned match structures, which could throw off timing and confuse opponents. Monsoon, who believed in crisp execution and professionalism, often had to clean up the mess on commentary or backstage in production meetings. While it never turned into an open feud, Monsoon once told a young agent, SD never met a spot he couldn't forget. Bad News Brown was a genuine tough guy with Olympic judo credentials and a chip on his shoulder the size of Brooklyn. Monsoon respected Brown's legit background, but their philosophies on the business couldn't have been more different. Brown famously refused to sell for certain wrestlers or do jobs he didn't agree with. He saw pro wrestling less as entertainment and more as a survival contest. That lone wolf attitude made him difficult to book, and difficult for Monsoon to manage. Monsoon believed in putting the show first. Do business, get paid, get out, was the old school mantra. Bad News Brown saw it differently. If he felt he was being disrespected, he'd walk. Or worse, he'd shoot. The tension between the two peaked in the late 80s during Brown's short-lived main event push. Gorilla, by then deeply involved in production, reportedly vetoed several storyline pitches involving Brown due to his unwillingness to cooperate with others. He told one producer, "I won't waste airtime on a guy who won't play ball." What's clear in all these stories isn't that Gorilla Monsoon was some grumpy old gatekeeper clinging to the past. It's that he believed in respect. Respect for the business, respect for your fellow workers, respect for the fans. The men who got under his skin most weren't necessarily the worst wrestlers, but the ones who dismissed that code of honor. Monsoon wasn't petty. He didn't hold grudges for no reason. If you came to work, did your job, and cared about the product, Gorilla would have your back. But if you were sloppy, arrogant, or made a mockery of the craft, you'd feel the cold shoulder of one of the most powerful voices in the company. It's worth noting that Monsoon also mentored dozens of stars, many of whom went on to become legends. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Randy Savage, they all had Monsoon's respect because they respected the business. Even Bobby Heenan, his longtime commentary foil, once said, "Gorilla would rib you, bury you on commentary, and then buy you dinner after the show, if you were one of the boys. But if you weren't, he made it clear." Gorilla Monsoon passed away in 1999, leaving behind a legacy that stretched from the ring to the broadcast booth to the boardroom. His voice is immortal, his presence still felt. But perhaps his greatest legacy lies in the standards he upheld. Wrestling was real to Gorilla, not in the break kayfabe sense, but in the sense that it mattered. The passion, the performance, the professionalism, it mattered. And if you didn't treat it with the same reverence, Gorilla Monsoon would let you know. With just a look, a sigh, or maybe a classic one-liner. Gorilla Monsoon was the voice of WWF, the gatekeeper of credibility, and the last guy you wanted silently judging your botched suplex from the commentary booth. He was a titan of taste, and when Gorilla hated you, brother, the whole locker room felt it. This ain't about kayfabe, it's about shoot heat, real animosity. So let's raise the curtain and drag out the 5 wrestlers Monsoon couldn't stand. It's roast time, and Gorilla's ghost is front row, stone-faced and shaking his head. So let's get right into it without wasting any time. Paul Roma strutted into the WWF locker room like he was God's gift to wrestling. Problem was, even God wanted a refund. The guy had the body of an action figure and the charisma of the plastic bubble it came in. Every time he cut a promo, Gorilla Monsoon looked like he was suffering a stroke in slow motion. Roma had a physique, sure. He looked like he could deadlift a horse, but couldn't carry a match to save his life. If flexing was a finish, he'd be champ. But once the bell rang, it was like watching a motivational speaker try MMA. Monsoon once said, "Roma's got abs, but no guts." He swaggered about like he was headlining WrestleMania, but the only thing he ever main evented was the warm-up match before the warm-up match. Gorilla Monsoon didn't hate Roma because he was bad. He hated him because Roma thought he was great. That kind of delusion is dangerous in the ring and even worse on the mic. Roma could cut a promo like a chainsaw with no gas, loud, pointless, and completely ineffective. Watching him talk was like watching someone give a TED talk on head trauma. This guy had the nerve to call himself a young stallion, which is ironic because every time he wrestled, the crowd stampeded to the bathrooms. Roma and Jim Powers were like the default characters on a wrestling video game before you unlocked the actual talent. And don't even get us started on Power and Glory, a tag team that sounded like an energy drink and wrestled like one had just spilled on a carpet. Hercules looked like he was dragging a bicep model around by the wrist. Their finisher was nice, but their matches felt like slow-motion blooper reels. Monsoon used to say, "These two have all the coordination of a food fight." But Roma thought he was royalty. He carried himself like he was Ric Flair, when really he was just Flair's dry cleaner's nephew. Monsoon called it straight. He looks like $1,000,000 and wrestles like counterfeit change. Billy Jack Haynes walked into the WWF like he was built by Zeus and managed by cocaine. The man looked like he was carved out of granite, but as Gorilla Monsoon once muttered off mic, all that muscle and still not enough to carry a match. Gorilla hated wrestlers who made the business harder for everyone, and Haynes was a one-man demolition crew for backstage sanity. Always full of conspiracy theories, paranoia, and legal threats, Billy Jack wasn't just toxic. He was a biohazard in tights. Monsoon saw him as a guy who could have made it, but chose instead to be a loud, unstable pain in the ass. He no-showed events. He argued with bookers. He thought every push that didn't go his way was some deep-state McMahon plot. Gorilla came from the era where you showed up, shut up, and did business. Billy Jack came from the school of, I should be champion because I grunted the loudest in catering. In the ring, he was all power and no polish. A suplex machine with no personality, except rage. His promos were like listening to a fever dream shouted through a bullhorn. Gorilla hated that kind of incoherent chest thumping. If Billy Jack had just wrestled and shut up, maybe Monsoon would have had his back. Instead, he treated every match like it was an audition for a lawsuit. Haynes constantly walked the line between shoot and stupid. From his feud with Hercules, where he practically potatoed the guy into a concussion, to his backstage rants, he was the kind of guy Monsoon would have rather seen in traffic than on the card. So here's to Billy Jack Haynes, the man who had the look of a main eventer and the mindset of a guy screaming outside a courthouse. Gorilla Monsoon didn't just hate watching him, he hated dealing with him. And when Gorilla hates dealing with you, you've already tapped out, brother. David Sammartino walked into the WWF carrying the greatest last name in company history, and immediately treated it like it was luggage he planned to lose. Bruno was a living god, a legit icon. David? He was the guy who got winded putting on his knee pads. Gorilla Monsoon didn't just dislike him, he saw him as a disgrace in boots. Monsoon loved Bruno. Bruno was tough, disciplined, respected. David was none of those things. He was the wrestling equivalent of someone showing up to Harvard because their dad donated a gym. The guy was riding Bruno's coattails so hard it's a miracle they didn't file a restraining order. In the ring, David was stiff, clumsy, and about as exciting as a tax seminar. His matches dragged harder than a drunk uncle at a wedding. And every time Gorilla had to call one of them, you could hear the soul leaving his body. "This youngster's got a long way to go," Monsoon once said, and by long way, he meant should leave the industry entirely. Backstage, David was even worse, entitled, arrogant, always barking about not getting pushed. The only thing he pushed was Gorilla's patience. Monsoon hated guys who thought the business owed them something. And David? He thought being Bruno's son meant the main event was waiting backstage with a fruit basket. When he wasn't crying about creative, he was making excuses. "I'm not my father," he'd say. "Yeah, David, we noticed." Bruno filled Madison Square Garden. You couldn't fill a punch card at Arby's. At WrestleMania, he needed his dad in his corner just to get a pop. It was like watching Bruce Lee's kid show up to a fight with nunchucks made of paper towels. So here's to David Sammartino, the most disappointing sequel since Caddyshack 2. Monsoon didn't hate David because of who his father was. He hated him because David thought that was enough. Tony Atlas had a body that looked like it was sculpted by Michelangelo on steroids. The man was a walking anatomy chart, if every muscle also came with a dumb opinion. Gorilla Monsoon wasn't impressed, because in Monsoon's world, muscles didn't matter if the brain they surrounded was still on airplane mode. Tony called himself Mr. USA, but Gorilla just called him Mr. Delusional. Atlas had charisma, but only in the way that a malfunctioning fire alarm has charisma. Loud, distracting, and impossible to ignore. His promos sounded like motivational speeches delivered during a concussion test. If words were weights, Tony couldn't lift a damn sentence. Gorilla hated egos that wrote checks the ringwork couldn't cash, and Tony's ego had overdrafted for years. He was unreliable, self-absorbed, and constantly blaming everyone but himself for why his push deflated faster than his cardio after 3 minutes in the ring. He wasn't just difficult, he was a walking HR complaint. Let's not forget the whole Saba Simba debacle. Vince threw him a cultural time bomb wrapped in tribal cosplay, and instead of refusing like a sane person, Atlas danced straight into it. Gorilla Monsoon refused to call that gimmick anything but an embarrassment, and when Monsoon thought you were embarrassing the business, you were dead to him. Period. Backstage, Atlas had more burned bridges than Sherman's March. Always arguing, always late, always broke, and always telling stories no one asked for. Monsoon liked prose. Tony Atlas was a walking episode of Behind the Music, but without the music. And yeah, he was strong. Great. So's a refrigerator, but at least that doesn't run its mouth about how it deserves a title run. Atlas was so self-obsessed, he probably flexed in the mirror before calling in sick. So here's to Tony Atlas, a man whose talent was buried under a mountain of muscle and missed opportunities. Gorilla Monsoon didn't just dislike him, he resented the wasted potential, the backstage drama, and the fact that Tony thought a six-pack was a substitute for a personality. Ken Patera wasn't just strong, he was throw a boulder at a bear strong. But Gorilla Monsoon didn't care how many weights you could lift when the heaviest thing you carried was your own bullshit. Patera went from Olympian to WWF embarrassment faster than you can say McDonald's incident. Yeah, let's start there. This guy literally threw a rock through a McDonald's window because they were closed. Who does that? Gorilla Monsoon came from a generation that built this industry with grit, honor, and a handshake. Patera showed up like an angry toddler who got denied a happy meal. He didn't just embarrass himself, he embarrassed the business. And for Monsoon, that was unforgivable. In the ring, Patera was strong, sure, but stiff? He made RoboCop look fluid. Gorilla hated calling his matches because they moved like molasses and landed like cement blocks. Patera sold punches like he was allergic to selling. Monsoon called it like he saw it. This guy couldn't sell water in a desert. Backstage, a total nightmare. Always acting like his Olympic resume made him untouchable. Gorilla didn't buy that crap. He respected people who worked. Patera wanted respect handed to him like a gold medal. Too bad all he earned was a jumpsuit and a mugshot. So here's to Ken Patera, the only guy who could powerlift a car but couldn't carry a storyline. Monsoon didn't just hate watching him wrestle. He hated explaining to the boys why the company kept giving this jackass second chances. Gorilla Monsoon didn't suffer fools. He suplexed them into the void. These five weren't just wrestlers he disliked, they were walking headaches and boots. From egos bigger than their talent to backstage disasters, they stood for everything Gorilla loathed. Wasted potential, no professionalism, and more drama than Monday Night Raw. Respect had to be earned in his era, and these guys left the receipt blank. When Gorilla rolled his eyes, it wasn't commentary, it was a eulogy. Enjoy the roast? Smash that like button like it owes you a payday and subscribe for more savage deep dives. It's free, unlike Tony Atlas's excuses. Thanks for watching.